Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Good morning. This is Zach in Washington, D.C. Today we are discussing your first tech. I need to read more, research, and the ERS Zoom takeover, all on Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers. That's right, Zach, Steve, and David today. Hey.
What has happened to our sisters? What has happened to our Lumen sisters?
Well, we have a Lumen sister coming next week. Ellen's going to be on the show next week.
That's great.
By the way, we should preview next week's show. Tell everybody what we're doing next week. What are we doing next week?
We are having an interview with Kirsten Hovland, who is an amazing, she creates media for all kinds of live events, and you just saw her work on the MTV Music Video Awards, and we're going to learn all about it. And hopefully she will have some really interesting stories about working on digital assets for the NBA when they were in the Disney bubble.
Oh, were they in the bubble?
Last year, they did all of the NBA stuff at Disney, and she was down there. And I think they literally ran an Ethernet cord from like the server room to her hotel room.
Now that's social distancing.
Yes. So we can ask her all about that.
Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, well, that should be a lot of fun next week. And so that's one of our sisters will be coming back. And hopefully all the sisters will be with us at LDI this year. So that's going to be a whole Ménage craziness. A Ménage of craziness. I like that.
It'll be like a family reunion with your drunk Uncle Bob. It'll be that.
Anyway, so welcome everyone to episode 234. We're going to start off this episode with news. That's right. Today's we got some news, lots of news coming on. All right. First of all, the big news, in my opinion, is this great show on HBO Max, which is David Byrne's American Utopia, with the fabulous lighting design by Rob Sinclair. Wow, Rob Sinclair.
The award-winning lighting design.
Yes, multi-award-winning lighting design. This show is a recording of the Broadway show from 2 years ago, pre-pandemic. And it is excellently shot and directed by Spike Lee. It's a terrific show. We're going to talk about it more during our Let's Talk About segment. So just hang on for about 20 minutes and you'll hear us tell you all about the lighting. But also in the news, we have Vanta-White, as I call it, and Zach will tell us all about it.
Yes, that is right. They're a bunch of scientists at Purdue University have created a paint that the Guinness Book of World Records has declared the whitest white. So I guess that's the opposite of the darkest black. And instead of being the lumisuck, the sucking of all light, this is the reflection of all light.
That's right.
And one of the things that makes it interesting is that it can reflect so much light that it actually can allegedly cool an environment that's painted with it more efficiently than an actual air conditioner.
That is
which
amazing.
I think is fascinating.
That is amazing. So I read that it reflects up to 98% of all light. Isn't that wild? 98%. Now, when I got my new roof put on about a year ago, they told me that I had a choice. I could either paint it black or paint it white. And being a lighting designer, knowing about a little bit about physics, I said, well, that's silly. I'm going to paint it white. Paint it white. I mean, no one can see it. It's a flat roof, right? And so I don't think they use this white stuff.
Why would anyone in California paint their roof black? I don't understand that.
I don't know.
Because they want to be cool. Like, not literally cool, but like they think it's hip.
It's not hip. It's not hip at all. Especially when you can't see it. It's like,
right.
Who cares? So I painted it white, and my house is actually a lot cooler. So anyway, well, that's great information. How can we use this in the theater?
That's the good question. Like, the Vanta-Black has the ability to make something disappear or appear flat. And so I wonder, what kind of storytelling would you want where you would want an object that can never disappear?
Paint the back wall of the theater with this white.
Right.
You have this amazing cyclorama now.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I guess if you only had to light a show with 4 lights, you just use this and then it'll be bright as day the whole time.
And cool.
And cool.
Okay.
You can turn your air conditioner off. You don't have to worry about the heat off all those movers anymore.
Oh,
That's
there you
right.
go. There you go. All the lights should be painted this color. Don't ask me why. I always wonder about those white lights.
The fixture will be brighter than the light coming out of it.
All right, let's move on. Steve has our first listener question.
It comes from Rick in Tennessee. And he writes, my teacher suggested I should start building a reference library. Where do I begin? Well, Rick, this is an easy one. So when you design a show, buy some research materials. Maybe you found some books on art or photography or images that speak to you. Maybe you're looking at a design book. I don't know. Maybe it's a article from a magazine. But this next show invests something in some research that you own from the show you're building. Maybe there's some DVDs. Maybe you look at some of these great movies, particularly some of the great foreign films of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and the lighting in that speaks to you. Maybe film noir speaks to you. But start investing in things that have caught your eye and have made you look at lighting a second time. You can go to a used bookstore, you can go to a public library sale, even your college library has sales. I geeked out and bought the 2 copies of Magic of Light when SMU had a sale a couple of years ago. $12 per book. They digitized everything. So that's how you start. What about you, Zach? You must have an amazing research library.
Yeah, I think another place where it all starts is when you think about the references other people give you. When you're working with a director and they might say, it wants to feel like, Technicolor. So then you think about, okay, I should get some kind of collection of Technicolor imagery, or it wants to look like a, Bambi. So I should get a book about the art of Bambi, or, a lot of these things, it's about the quality of light and the quality of the color. A lot of lighting designers that I've worked with always pull out books of Edward Hopper paintings, to talk about the quality of light in this, and, the daytime look here and the nighttime look and the street lamp look. And so a lot of it is sort of, these kind of references so that you can expand your own knowledge about what somebody means when they say, I want to have it have like a look like, The Godfather or Star Wars or, 2001. What does that quality of light mean? What does that quality in the color mean? And then also for your own, education of things that you like. So you might want to come to the table and say, I would love for it to have a feeling like, this painting here by Van Gogh, which the quality of the blue in this painting is really what I'd love to go for. I've even had a director that brought in these Easter candies and said, this is the kind of color I want to use, the color of these Easter candies. So I don't know if you really want to keep that in your library because it'll expire. But that idea of just like taking these little bits and pieces of information that everyone tells you about, we're going to talk about this American Utopia thing, print out a couple of frame grabs of that show and, stick it on your shelf so that if you want to talk about the quality of that gray or the quality of the colors that they use in there, you can pull these out and say, hey, what do you think about this?
I learned how to do all my photographic research from Mr. Zach Bovray because I was asking the panel at LDI where they get their content. And Mr. Bovray basically held up his phone and said, I get it all here. Because Mr. Bovray doesn't like to pay royalties. And I don't blame him because royalties are expensive.
Well, sure, yeah.
So why not?
Yeah.
Why not do it yourself? And actually, Driscoll tells this great story about when he was doing La Donna del Lago at the Met.
Yes.
Where the type of images that he wanted to use cost so much money, it was actually cheaper for him to be flown over to, I guess it was in Scotland, right?
Yeah, it was Scotland.
And,
yeah. Not just to be flown over, to buy a camera and be flown over.
And his wife, I believe, who he called his assistant at the time.
Yes.
And I'm sure she assisted
and a special warm coat.
Yes, it is cold over there. And he shot it all so he could use it on his show without any sort of royalties being paid.
Right. Right. And then he could sell it to someone else.
That's right. And make money. And I'm sure he'd have to give his wife a cut, but that's a whole nother story. But
I think that comes with the territory.
No, that's a good idea. When that show moves again, he could sell it again.
Just as a side note to this, there's a place in New York that's very, very close to many projection designers' hearts. We all learned about it from Wendell Harrington. That's called the Picture Collection at the New York Public Library, where for many, many, many decades, various librarians and other people would cut out like old advertisements and photographs and just like literally take that advertisement for like Sprite from 1962, mount it on a piece of cardboard and file it away in this picture collection. You can go and search just for images like that at this place. So if you're in New York, you can go there. And the picture collection was considering not making it a public thing anymore. And Wendell and some other fine folks got together and rallied against that. They got a petition together and they decided to keep it a public thing, which is really wonderful.
Well, Janine from Fort Lauderdale. How do you like that? This could be our first Fort Lauderdale listener. She writes, I will design my first show in a few weeks at school. What can I expect at Tech? What do I need to do to not get bogged down? Well, Janine, I don't know because I don't know what level you are. Okay, are you at this high school, undergrad? I assume you're not a grad student because you probably have been to a few techs by then. But there are some real important things that you need to do to pre-plan for tech. First of all, you need to do your research and your homework and make sure that you have a cue list, that you've already figured out what you're going to do with the show, and you've written it all down on a cue list with descriptions of how you want to approach the lighting. There should be a cue here, what the light, what the light cue should do. It's not going to have all the cues, but at least it'll give you a skeletal structure of how to start cueing the show. You could always fill in light cues later. Hopefully you have a really good production manager and a really good stage manager, and that they have experience in how to run a tech. Also, meet with the director long before the tech so that you guys can figure out how to plan it out, and also set reasonable goals for that tech rehearsal. This could be one of 2 techs. It could be one of 3 techs. Usually you have a very long tech or a very long cueing session, and then you do like a cue to cue with actors the next day, and then you do a run through that night. That's your typical 2 10 out of 12s, which are bad words now. We can't even say 10 out of 12s, but I said it's sort of like saying Macbeth in the theater.
We can bleep that.
Yeah, we can say Macbeth in the theater, but now I'm going to be struck down by lightning because I said Macbeth, right? Screw Macbeth, screw the 10 out of 12s. I don't care. All I know is that set goals, right? Say tonight, I've got like 50 cues in Act 1, and I've got 20 cues in Act 2. Maybe we just look at doing 40 cues tonight, right? Don't freak out and spend that time and be efficient. Efficiency is everything at tech rehearsal. Also remember that tech is the time for everyone who's involved in the technical aspects to get it right. So if you want to see a transition again, let's say you ran the transition and it didn't work, maybe the sound cue was off, maybe the light cue needs to be adjusted or whatever, then ask the stage manager to run it again. This is really your rehearsal. It's really not the director's rehearsal or the actor's rehearsal. And good directors know this because they want to get the tech done as soon as possible, and they want it to be right so that they're not spending times during dress rehearsals fixing technical issues. And one other thing about that cue list that you did, make sure you give that cue list to the stage manager long before the tech rehearsal, so that stage manager can put those cues in their book, and that gives them a head start as well. Same thing if you're doing sound. That stage manager should have all the sound, projection, and lighting cues there in their book before tech starts. Don't expect the stage manager to be writing them all in as you're going. How about you guys? What do you think? What suggestions can we give Janine?
Well, I would have a good, clean magic sheet. And you may find that you start your tech with your magic sheet, and by the time you get to the first break, you need to rewrite your magic sheet. Maybe the layout is not visually the way you're working. So, start with a magic sheet. Make sure you have a light. Make sure you can see what you're doing at the tech table. If you're setting your own console up, keep it simple. The thing I see is sometimes a young lighting designer will have there'll be menus 5 screens deep, and you can't just be digging around, flipping through screens, trying to find what you're looking for. If you have the opportunity to use automation on the show, go ahead and pre-build your color. The thing that kind of stumbles people is they sit there and go, my light will do 200 colors, so why should I pre-build a color? I'll just have what I want. You don't build a 200 color scroll. You have the 5 or 6 colors you want to work with and stick with it. And I think finally it is speak up. Talk to the director, talk to the stage manager. I need 5 minutes. What you don't want to do as a general rule, and I understand things can change, but as a general rule at Tech, you don't want to be sitting there saying, I'll take a note on that. I'll take a note on that. Because generally you come back into the theater late at night when everyone's gone or early the next day, and it's not clear to you anymore. All of a sudden there are no actors on stage. And so now you're staring at a floor, lighting a floor. So that's kind of, easy stuff to do.
I actually have a related follow-up question for you guys, which is something Steve and I were talking about earlier. Sort of as an educator, when you see that things are getting bogged down, when do you feel it's appropriate to intervene, so to speak, if at all?
It's a good question. If there seems to be very little organization and the director's not doing, because usually a director, if it's getting bogged down, the director will say, okay, guys, come on, we got to pick it up, or let's move on. If a director says, let's move on, then you move on. If the director's not doing that, then what I do as an educator is I go to the director. I don't go to the student. Maybe on one hand, I could count the times where I had to intervene in a technical rehearsal, just to get things rolling. And the last thing in the world you want to do as an educator is to basically say, no, take channel 23 to full. Now kill it. No, don't ever do that. You could give that note later. Like you could have done this or you could have done that. But no, you never want to embarrass a student like that or take over.
I will say that it was a challenge. Often when I taught at Emerson, the people who would try projections were lighting or scenic people who had never done projections before. And this was in an undergrad program. So I love being a mentor to them, but it's almost like, teaching a kid to swim or something where I'm like, I got to push you out there and you can't ask me this question during tech. But like, if you want to ask me after tech, we can, go get a beer and talk about what happened. But part of it, like I told Steve, it's like you have to touch the fire to learn that it's going to burn you.
Yeah, I've had other faculty members who had directed, and they tell me, "Oh, I'm so glad you're going to be there. Tomorrow. I really can't wait to see your lighting." I said, "What? My lighting? No, you're not going to see me. You're going to see my students' lighting." "Oh, yeah, but you'll make sure it's okay. You'll make sure." I said, "No, I'm not going to make sure it's okay."
Well, you made sure it was okay with what you taught them before.
Yeah, exactly. Are you going to make sure it's okay for that actor to say their lines correctly and not skip 3 pages of dialogue? Are you going to get up there and say the lines? No, and I'm not going to light your damn show. All right, I'm calm now.
Deep breath.
So anyway, Zach has our next question.
Molly in Austin writes, my school's library has some really interesting books on scenic design, stage makeup, lighting design, and costume design, but nothing about projections. Can you recommend some good reading for projection design? This is an excellent and frequently asked question. I think that part of the answer to this can be found in our conversation earlier in this episode about your reference library and what kind of things you might want to have in your reference library. But the other part of it, which is really kind of a great thing, is because projections are this ephemeral, amorphous thing that doesn't necessarily adhere to the rules of scenic or lighting design, that you can extract great information from all kinds of sources, including books about scenic or lighting design. Even in the Robert Edmund Jones book, The Dramatic Imagination, way back in 1941, He's talking a little bit about how, the next step in theater in his mind is going to be the incorporation of moving images into the scenic design of a show. In terms of books that were actually specifically written about projection design, there are a handful that are out there. Two that I recommend. The first one is called Live Movies, A Field Guide to New Media for the Performing Arts. It's by Kirby Malone and Gail Scott White, who were professors of new media at George Mason, and they wrote this book. And coming out this December, there's a book from the Focal Press Toolkit series, which has a lot of great books about scenic and lighting and all other kinds of theatrical stuff, called The Projection Designer's Toolkit. And that's going to be by Jeremy Hopgood. And that comes out in right before the holidays. Makes a great Christmas present for you or the library. Another book that I found very influential is called Designing Disney, Imagineering and the Art of the Show by John Hench. And a lot of what he talks about in that book is the use of color and images in a three-dimensional space. So it's not specifically about doing things with projections, but it's about how do I take this space and transform it into something else, which is really what, at its core, projections are all about. So those are some books that I recommend and that I found very useful. There's also a lot of interesting stuff you can find on YouTube. You can find things like the most recent USITT magazine was all about Wendell Harrington. There's like 4 articles about her and her story, and you can learn a lot from that. Live Design has a lot of great articles about projection design. So we're getting there.
You mentioned Robert Edmund Jones. Yeah, like he was a little bit ahead of his time, don't you think?
Oh, totally.
He was amazing artist. The Dramatic Imagination, read it if you haven't read it.
If you're in school studying scenic design, you've probably been assigned it already.
Or lighting design, or costume design, or acting, or directing, which he did all that, by the way.
Not so much for box office.
No, he wasn't big for box office.
Well, ushers, maybe.
Yeah.
You are listening to Light Talk, and today's episode is sponsored by...
From way up in the Texas Panhandle, it's Total Bastard Stage Productions. Since COVID raised its ugly little head, it's been 548 days since we had a good old-fashioned rock and roll tour. During that time, some of our older LDs have chosen to step aside, to retire, as it were. And we all know what that means. Opportunity for those 20-something whippersnappers trying to make their mark. The problem is, eager as they are, they lack the experience to shine, the know-how, the chops. Well, no more. Total Bastard Stage Productions, working with our programming partners in Japan, Look at Me, Mommy, are proud to introduce the latest in console technology, the Easy Make. With automation at every step, simply insert your Backstage Pass into the Creation Access Reader and select from punk, metal, soul, folk, rockabilly. It's that easy, and the list goes on and on and on with the Easy Make. The Easy Make has over 200 possible musical styles. Just let Easy Make select how to best program your rig for the band. That's right. Programming a show just got smarter and faster. Enjoy your light show in minutes, not hours. And you no longer have to choose just one style. Select Mixmaster mode and choose country, metal, and reggae for the wildest lighting ride you'll ever take. Or my favorite, funk, jazz, and western swing. You get the idea. The combinations are endless. And say goodbye to those endless hours of previs and tech rehearsals. The Easy Make has mastered advanced lighting techniques so you don't have to. All you need do is stand there in your leather pants and look badass. Small in size, big on features, the Easy Make will fit in an overhead bin of an airplane, the back seat of a cab, or on the subway. The Easy Make will even fit into a large messenger bag so it's always by your side and ready for action. And when you buy the Easy Make, you will receive weekly emails with ideas, tips and techniques, and other programming news from the programmers at Look at Me, Mommy. Experience the excitement, the respect, the success of letting the Easy Make you look good. Be honest. Isn't it time you sent your grandma to the nursing home? How do you know you're getting Total Bastard products? just look for that caveman holding that roll of gel on the label. Happy touring, y'all.
Sign me up.
The Easy Make Oven. Remember that? Or was that? Oh, that was the Easy Bake Oven.
Easy Bake.
Yeah.
It's scary how this is similar to some actual products out there in the projections world.
And it's recognizable. I think when you see somebody messing with a console and they let the console do everything and make those choices, I mean, you can tell it. You go, oh, that's console did that.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah. And now, back to Light Talk.
Well, the sound of those rabid ducks tells us that once again it's time for Let's Talk About. And today's Let's Talk About is all about Rob Sinclair's lighting design for David Byrne's American Utopia, playing now on HBO Max. Wow, this is a big deal, let me tell you. As promised at the top of our show, we are going to talk about this fabulous lighting design. First of all, let's talk about the artist a bit. David Byrne, Talking Heads. I don't know if you guys know about the Talking Heads. I know a lot of our listeners are around our ages, and the Talking Heads were huge in the 80s.
But the Talking Heads were messing around at CBGB's, and in 76, that is when they got their first record deal.
Oh, okay.
So when you think about 1976 and the prep work of just being a band trying to get to where they got to in 76, I mean, he's been doing this man and boy for what, 50 years?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, there was this really good interview with David Byrne on CBS Sunday Morning where he talks about the history of the Talking Heads. And he did talk about that, but that is really interesting. But anyway, David Byrne, what an interesting artist. And he certainly has a lot to say about what's going on in our world.
One of the things they talked about in that interview is that he started out life with the desire to be some kind of graphic designer, graphic artist, and he just sort of fell into music, and that took over and became successful. So he almost never had a chance to get back to that graphic artist stuff that he wanted. But I don't know if you remember when we had Wendell Harrington on, the Talking Heads, they are, responsible for that amazing concert film, Stop Making Sense. And she talked about how much of David Byrne's input went into what became that concert and what became that film. And how amazing is it to have now created a second concert and film that is pretty much as iconic as the other one. Most people don't get one home run like that, and he's now got two.
Oh, definitely. Well, he's also teamed up with Spike Lee on this one. I mean, that certainly helps.
Well, it didn't hurt. It didn't hurt having Annie Parsons do the choreography for it.
The choreography was just awesome. For the people who haven't seen it yet, there are two dancers. They're dancers, actors, singers. By the way, I think there are like 12 or 13 people in this band. And all of them are incredible triple threats. They're all incredible musicians, they're incredible dancers, and they're incredible singers. I've never seen so much talent on one stage with so few people. Really, it is just an amazing show. And the two dancers are just so fabulous. The choreography that everyone does, but especially these two, is just quite stunning. And Rob talks about how the choreography inspired a lot of the lighting, and the lighting inspired some of the choreography as well, which was very interesting. But his work was just stunning, and I was kind of happy about it. He used primarily all Viper performances on this show. And the Vipers are my favorite light, even though they're kind of long in the tooth nowadays because they're arc fixtures. I've used Vipers for years, and I love Vipers. They're quiet, they got a great light, they're dependable. And it was funny because in some of the effects that you see in the show, it's like, oh yeah, I've used that effect wheel before. But not like this. This is fantastic. And it was really funny because One of the directors I work with all the time, he told me about this. He says, do you have HBO Max? You got to see the show. And I watched it and I called him up. I said, I know why you like the show. He goes, why? He goes, because this is something that you and I would do. And really, it's a style of lighting that I love. And I love working with Ken in this type of style. By using the Vipers, he was able to get this amazing color. He played with color temperature all the time. I mean, there was one song where the cues were just the changing of the color temperature, going from cool to warm. And I'm not talking about blue to red. I'm talking about like 5,600 Kelvin to like 3,600 Kelvin. And just that was absolutely sublime. And they also use BlackTrax on the show. And for the people who don't know what BlackTrax is, it's basically a auto tracking system. And every performer had two little IR beacons attached to their shoulders so that lights could follow anybody on stage. So that was pretty cool.
David Byrne puts a disclaimer right up front on this show. And he says it's about people connecting with people. There's no scenery. There's nothing there. You don't want to look at a bag of potato chips. You want to look at a human being. So that gives you a lot of freedom as a lighting designer too, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I read that, this lighting designer also talked a lot about the idea that less is more kind of thing, I remember Steve Jobs once was quoted as saying, great design is about subtraction. And that what you're seeing there is basically exactly what they felt they needed to tell the story that they wanted to tell. And including that the fact that every single instrument is wireless, all the microphones are wireless. Sometimes they had to break up a drum kit between two people so that each person could actually physically carry it in order to be able to achieve the sound that they wanted, but still have that very clean look and the mobility to perform that choreography. So what you're seeing up there is like literally just enough to successfully tell the story without any fat at all.
Well, it's certainly true of the opening. Really complex opening, and again, the lighting designer says, why use two lights if you can use one? But that play with squares of light on stage and the slash of light, I mean, that was very much getting back to those performance arts days of the artist.
Yep, that is great. Speaking of the band, I don't know, Zach, what did you think of that bass player?
Everybody in that band I thought was excellent. And what's really interesting about it, especially as a projection designer, that David Byrne is one of those artists that puts together a show that almost, unless, it was up to him to have projections and stop making sense, and he created a show that needed it. But he is such an engaging performer that I could just watch him. I wouldn't need to watch anything else. I could just look at a close-up of his face for 2 hours and feel totally satisfied.
And there were very few projections in this show, and I don't even know if they were superimposed later, but there was that one projection of Colin Kaepernick and toward the beginning of the show, and then that incredible piece at the end where they have all those photos of the mothers holding up their dead sons and daughters. And I think that was done after the fact, but that is just so amazing. But you're right, all those musicians were amazing. But I must tell you, I counted 6 basses. I really did.
Yeah. I was running to the internet like, what kind of bass is that?
Yeah. Well, he had a Rickenbacker. He had some precision basses. They were beautiful. And he was a great player. And again, I couldn't believe the dancing that he was doing while he was playing these very complex bass lines. And the drumming and the percussion was fabulous. The musical director, who was also the keyboard player, was also amazing. It was just so much in that show. David Byrne talks about during one of the transitions, because it's basically do musical number 2 or 3, and then he talks to the audience. And one of my students told me yesterday, says it was the perfect combination of live music performance and TED Talk. He says,
I would totally agree.
You know what I mean? I said, that's perfect, man. It was like a TED Talk and a live music. But he talks about how everybody's unfettered, and that was so important. He says it was about them being able to move wherever they want to move. And that's why BlackTrax was so necessary, because yes, it's choreographed and it's organized choreography, but boy, those lights are right on.
Yeah.
They're
and
right
also
on.
just the fact that the way everyone is dressed and the chain that sort of the scene is made of, that it has the ability to sort of disappear, but not totally disappear. So like you always feel like you're at a live event and you're not just like watching a play. So there's something about it. And I think that part of this too, again, is like a testament to David Byrne and his performance style, that it feels kind of natural and live, but we also know that it was probably at that point almost identical every performance. But it didn't come across like that. It came across like it was like a communal event almost. And even though we're not up on stage in gray or sitting at home wearing a gray suit, that like we all kind of feel a part of it, the way he's talking to us.
Yeah, and that gray was brilliant. That gray is a stealable idea. It's funny, I'm reading this article, this interview with Rob Sinclair, and he says, they asked him, how would you describe the show's design? And he says, brutally efficient. Never use two lights when one will do. And never add an unnecessary cue. Boy, I'm telling you, that is great advice for our young listeners out there.
Well, getting back to Zach's point, I mean, if I'm going to be really brutal, how many rock and roll shows have you gone to where lights and projection have simply gotten in the way? They're a distraction. And all of a sudden, it is presentational. It's everything we hate about a proscenium arch show. What this evening managed to do was bring the audience into it. I mean, they were totally there. They were connected every minute on stage. Whatever they were doing, that audience and those performers were connected.
That's right. And it meant something. It was art. It was not like flash and trash.
I was going to say, what David Byrne said in that interview about how he wants you to sort of end in a different place than where and who you were at the beginning. That they by engaging the audience in that way, they really achieved that.
Right.
So did you have a favorite song?
Oh, man.
That's a tough one.
I mean, for me, I was a sucker for the television song.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was so great when he went stage left and just sang into the television.
That was awesome.
Yeah,
that lighting cue was awesome. That I guess it was some sort of a GLP strip light off stage, or maybe it was some PARs or something. But that color was just unbelievable on him, and the shadow that it threw through that chain onto the band all the way stage right. Oh my God! It was just stunningly beautiful and simple. Simple, and beautiful. Yeah, I don't know. I like the class, I love Burning Down the House. I used to play that song all the time. It was one of my favorite songs to play. And it has that great percussion break in it, and it was just awesome. But I think my favorite song was toward the end of the show. It was titled Hell You Tombout, and I'm probably mispronouncing that. But it was a song by Janelle Monáe that she gave him permission to perform in this, and it was so powerful. And it was the one about killing all those young men and women in the streets of the United States. That one was so stunningly beautiful. The way he presented it, that was probably my favorite moment of the piece.
It was just so refreshing that they didn't try to like shoehorn it into like a Broadway feel.
Right.
They didn't turn into a jukebox musical in a way.
If you go back and look at that, the female percussionist, who knows what the true story is? But if you go back and watch that, her feet are wrapped.
That's right. She's the only one with the wrapped feet.
Right.
She's wearing compression socks on her feet with the toes cut out.
It may be an injury or something. We don't know.
Yeah.
And I was surprised when she danced with the two dancers.
Oh, yeah.
And she held her ground with them without any problem at all.
Yeah.
You're right about how multi-talented this collection of people are.
Oh, my God. How do they do 8 shows a week? I could never figure that out, for how Broadway performers can do it. It's just amazing.
A lot of hot tea, apparently.
Yeah, because he's singing. And, David Byrne is 69 years old.
Yeah.
And he was incredible. The energy that he puts out there is just amazing. I mean, he's the whole show, really. Well, he's not the whole show.
Yeah.
I mean, that band is the show. And the audience, wow, the audience was so engaged. They were up on their feet. It was in a great theater. So it was in the Hudson Theater, I believe that was the theater they were in.
Yeah.
And it's a great old small Broadway house. And they were on their feet. It was just fantastic.
Well, and another thing that, is important to consider is not just the quality of the show, but, there are definitely shows like that, both big rock and roll shows, music award shows, Broadway shows that you can, try to capture by just filming it, put a camera here, put a camera there, and that's that. You get that sort of masterpiece theater like the Sunday in the Park with George that was on. But like this also felt like a film as opposed to just a captured performance. And the fact that they were able to work together and find ways to make it look good on the camera, look good for the audience that was there live at the same time, and nowadays, especially with everything being streaming, you have to think about like, how's this going to look when someone's watching it on their phone? How's this going to look when someone's watching it on their iPad or their computer versus their fancy OLED TV, that I think that's an amazing achievement in itself, is the ability to capture it in a way that feels engaging without just feeling like it's a recording of a Broadway show.
Also, there's a few bands that can bring that kind of energy to the stage and that kind of, stamina. I mean, the Stones can. But let's keep in mind that concert was an hour and 45 minutes long.
Yeah. No intermission.
That was a workout. When you think about what these people are doing, it's an hour and 45 minutes of jazzercise.
Well, apparently they all bike to and from the theater. So I don't know if you watch the credits or not, but watch the credits when you see the show, because it's hysterical, because they show them leaving on bikes and then coming back.
Yeah.
It's really kind of cool. I just thought the whole thing was brilliantly done. I really did.
Absolutely.
And kudos to Rob Sinclair. You deserve every award you get on this one, buddy. That was a great work. We got to have him on the show. I want to talk to him about the Vipers. And I'm curious. They like I said earlier, they've opened it again just this past Friday night on Broadway. I wonder if they're using the same rig or if he's moved over to LED. Boy, would that be a tough one to have to cue, because it's a totally different way of dealing with color temperature. I would say stay with the Vipers, man.
Right. He's got to find a shop that will keep them in stock for him.
That's right. And a lot of lamps. Make sure they probably change the lamps every night, maybe. Who knows, right?
I mean, that's like Beauty and the Beast. They stuck with VL2s for a long time.
Yeah.
And those are noisy, though. Why would they do that, man? They're like noisy.
Well, they were
lights.
terrified to pull it all apart and try to start recueing it all.
Yeah.
So it was a slow process. I think 5s were where they eventually updated to.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, there was a similar story with Wicked, I think, for the projections, the projector that they used for it, the high-end DL2 or the DL3, and they stopped making it. So, but knowing it's Wicked and there's like 30 different productions all over the world that are going to run forever, the shop started buying every single one that popped up on eBay. And because they knew they were going to need them. And then I think maybe after like 10 or 15 years, they finally moved to something else.
Wow.
But for a while, it was easier to just keep buying more and fixing them.
Wow. That's crazy. The problem is, with Rob's philosophy of light, why use 2 when you could use 1?
Right.
If you only use 1, if that lamp goes out, you're kind of screwed.
Right.
Although I'm sure since they've got, everything on BlackTrax, the electrician or programmer can quickly like punch up another light and they'll hit that actor.
That's true.
So I'm sure they've figured that one out, because I'm sure they've had burnouts before. All right. Well, that was great. Go watch it. Get HBO Max. It's worth the $14. And then you can also watch Bill Maher. So anyway, Steve has the last question of the day.
And it's from Stephen in L.A., and he writes, as the ERS becomes more and more expensive, think LED, is there any room left for fixed focal lights? it seems zooms are the way to go for a medium-sized theater or a school with multiple spaces. Well, the ERS, also known as the LECO, that is the workhorse of stage lighting. With that light, with an ERS, you can get so much from one fixture. You can control size, shape, texture, edge, color, intensity. That all comes out of an ERS. And I think, specifically to your question, you need to know how different lights work and what you can get from them. So if I look at an ERS fixed focal length, typically those are 90s, 50, 40, 30, 20, 14, 12, 10, and 5. And all of those degrees have a rule on how you might use them. So you need to learn the rule of when and where to use a 90 degree as opposed to a 20 degree. Now, once you've learned the rules, understand that the rules are made to be broken. So once you master the light, you can make that thing do anything you want to. Getting to an ERS zoom, the zoom typically comes in two flavors, a 15 to 30 and a 25 to 50. You have a point. I guess if I had a small theater, I had a small inventory and two spaces, and I was trying to bounce back and forth between the two, you do make a good point that maybe a zoom is the way to go. However, I think there's some downsides to a zoom. I think what happens mostly, and this is what the zoom wasn't intended to be used this way, but I think mostly people buy zooms, they put them in a position, they lock them into a focal range, and they never change it. Here it comes into the front of house, it's locked, and it just doesn't move. So why pay all that money for a zoom that you're going to turn into a fixed focal light? I think young designers, don't make really good decisions with a zoom. I think they get it in the space, and it's not quite big enough, or it is too big, and they didn't really think, well, I really need this to be a 40 degree. Let me see if I can turn it into a 50, or let me see if I can turn it into a 20. So I think a zoom, if you're not careful when you're young, you become a little sloppy when you're using them. Also, zooms can be tricky with the edge and gobo use. So all of a sudden, if you're going to use zooms, get one in there and test it and see what it's really capable of doing. And can you put it in a focal length that still allows you to get a sharp edge on a gobo? So I'm not sold on zooms yet. I don't know. How do you guys feel about zooms versus fixed focal length?
I agree. I've never liked zooms. I've never liked them. They're heavy. They're awkward. You can never get the focus right. It's a pain in the ass. And I agree, Steve, that if you use zooms or if you're depending on zooms, you get real sloppy with your photometrics. And they're never going to give you the amount of power. Like if you have a 36 degree fixture and then you have a zoom that you go ahead and roll the 36 degrees, you're never going to get as much power with the same lamp because it's not optimized. It's like a jack of all trades and a master of none. I'm not a fan.
Stephen, what you might do, let's say your small theater needs, 24, 30 degrees. That's what you need. And your bigger theater, it would be nice if you had 6, 20 degrees. Maybe you buy your 24 lights with a 36-degree barrel in it, and then you buy 6 barrels at 20 degrees. So you're flipping a few barrels out, and maybe that's how you solve this problem.
Yeah, I mean, it also seems like in the world of replacing a light, if you have to deal with something that's a fixed focal light, it should be much easier to get back to what you're trying to create than if you're fiddling with the zoom.
And sometimes you just need that incandescent light at the front of the stage to throw shadows over everything, and everyone's happy. I love that.
Or if you're David Byrne, you put a 2K lamp out there.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, that's a custom-built thing.
He said they had that specially made. I said, it just looks like a 2K projector lamp.
Well, you could see it. You could see the afterglow as it went out.
Oh, yeah, there was a lot of afterglow there. No doubt about that. Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tells us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on Spotify, iTunes, Google, YouTube, LiveDesignOnline.com, Amazon Prime Music, and just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org for future guests, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk Shinnuckery.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you do decide to litigate, the law firm of Flecht, Flock, Flare, and Glare and their paralegal Snoot will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Washington, D.C., and just left of the Chisholm Trail.
And tune in next week when Steve, Zach, and Ellen talk about more crazy shenanigans in our industry.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Toodles.
Bye-bye.